Very good morning. Thank you for joining us. My first question is just how much time have you spent behind bars in the last few months?
Thank you very much for having me on your program, Hugo. I've spent 81 days in prison during a period of 6 months. I was arrested the first time on the 20th of July, and I was accused of inciting violence. They said that march that was going to take place on the 31st of July was incited by myself, which is of course false. Then the second time I was arrested again in November, on the 3rd of November. Initially they said I'd broken my bail conditions, and when they took me to the police station, they then put a charge that I'd insulted the Chief Justice. And when they realized that the Chief Justice said to come and give evidence because it was a false charge, they then changed of obstruction because I had exposed the corrupt arrangement between the NPA, the National Prosecution Authority of Zimbabwe, and the President's niece, Henrietta Rushwaya, who had been caught at Robert Mugabe International Airport with 6 kilograms of gold. She was going to be given bail unopposed. And when I exposed that, it was me who was arrested. And then the third time they arrested me, accused me of having tweeted that a police officer had killed a child who was on the mother's back using a police baton stick. Again, it was false, and yet I spent another 20 days in prison.
Now, you're being charged with inciting public violence, and obviously this case will be tried from May this year. How are those charges looking? What evidence do they have against you?
It's just trumped up charges, Hugo. They are saying that I tweeted that elections have not worked in Zimbabwe. They are saying that I said the judiciary is captured in Zimbabwe. They are saying that I said ZANU-PF must go. And they are said the combination of those three means that I'm inciting violence, which is hogwash.
Did you say those things,
we have got freedom of expression under... Yes, I did. It's a freedom of expression to say that elections have not worked. It's intellectual analysis. So for one to be criminalized for saying that elections don't work when everyone has said so and when the evidence is overwhelming, it's absolutely ridiculous. But this is being done to instill the fear of God, not only in me, but in citizens and in journalists, so that we don't report on corruption. Because all my trouble started when I started exposing the huge amounts of money that was being looted. There was a $60 million fund which was meant for COVID to buy equipment for hospitals, to buy test kits, and to buy equipment that was going to be used by doctors and nurses. And when I started exposing that, when it started touching on very senior figures of party, that's started. In fact, the ruling party at the press conference, where their spokesperson, Hopewell Chin'ono, said that I should stop talking about the president being involved in corruption and that I would be in trouble, and indeed the trouble came to pass.
Very interesting. Now, looking at the many run-ins that you've had with the law, I mean, you talked about spending 81 days in prison in the last 6 months, and that's a long time. What are you looking to achieve?
I'm just doing my work as a journalist. Our work as journalists is to expose corruption, to help the citizens understand what is going on around them, so that citizens can make the right decisions in how they interface with public life, with public officials. And our job as journalists is to hold the powerful and the government of the day to account. I'm simply that wants scrutiny, a government that does not want the truth, a government that is corrupt, and a government that does not want to attend to the corruption. Just today I tweeted evidence that was put in Parliament that the National Roads Company, Zinara, which is responsible for fixing our roads, has had millions looted. People were being given thousands of dollars hair allowance to go to saloons. Millions were being looted through work being given without tenders. And yet roads in Zimbabwe, you were here recently, you saw that roads in Zimbabwe have become a death trap. Even the president said so. But when we say these things, we're then accused of being unpatriotic, where they accuse us of taking orders from the West. And yet what we're simply saying is, do not funds and to build infrastructure for the country because it's causing people to die. To give you a good example, Hugo, the biggest hospital in Zimbabwe, Harare Hospital or Salemgad Hospital, has only two maternity theaters. They were built in 1977 by Ian Smith during the colonial rule, and only one of them is working. And yet, just one Land Cruiser could fix that problem. Yet, the ministry has a lot of Land Cruisers given out to directors, and yet the things that they're supposed to be superintending over, they are not working.
Hopewell, you're essentially the de facto whistleblower in many ways. Have you achieved any success in terms of, you've obviously created awareness, alerted the government, the authorities to some of the dealings that you have picked up? Have there been any arrests, any convictions?
There have been arrests, but no convictions, because the people that are at the forefront of doing these things are also in control of the state institutions that are supposed to be doing this work. So, for example, when I exposed the looting of public funds meant for COVID, the company that was responsible for the looting called drugs, briefcase company that does not exist anyway. The people that are responsible are also involved and have relationships with people in high offices. So we don't expect any convictions. That's why the focus is on those of us that expose the corruption in order to shut us down.
Now, one of the things you've said obviously brings the judiciary into question. I'm going to read something that I picked up from New Zimbabwe, an online publication, and reports that judges wrote a letter to President Mnangagwa in late 2020. Judges are therefore now so afraid of their own jobs that they consciously and subconsciously make decisions that they consider safe, even if these do not accord with the law, the letter reads. Your thoughts around that, and obviously the judiciary and possible capture of it?
Well, there's a case now the Editorial Tribunal of a judge, Justice Eric Ndewere, who has alleged and accused the Chief Justice of giving instructions on how to make rulings in bail cases. One of my co-accused, his name was brought up in that tribunal. The judge says that the Chief Justice pushed her not to give bail to Member of Parliament Job Scala, who is my co-accused. So, of course, we worry about those things. But when whether I go to prison or not, because the world knows the truth. And even if they send me to prison, it's actually good in the sense that I will pay a price whilst I'm in prison, but it will bring the spotlight on Zimbabwe. The whole world will now focus on what's happening in Zimbabwe. My trial has been offered a trial observer by the George Clooney Foundation. So the world is listening to what's happening. The world is saying, I'm convicted.
We're obviously struggling to hear you, Hopewell, but thank you for your time this morning, and we'll continue to follow your story.